Hello and welcome back to the Football Heritage podcast. I'm your host, Rory Bryce, and today I'm delighted to announce that I'm joined by Exeter City's new stadium announcer, Matt Riley.
Thank you very much. You heard it here first. I was still buzzing from finding out this morning. So great to see you, Rory. Great to speak to you as well. So really looking forward to talking about three clubs all within 30 minutes of my doorstep in Bangkok.
Yeah, I mean, just to say congratulations on getting that role. That's every football fan's dream to get a job like that, and you must be so excited to get started. You know, as you
Oh
said
yeah.
off air, just waiting for Saturday to come around.
Definitely. I want to see how far I can push it, Rory. I've got a few ideas. I'm not
Uh,
sure how far the club will want me to push it, but I'm looking to. In fact, I called the opposition today and said I'd like to sort of call out some of their best fans and the people that really put the hours in for the club, and it was so nice and they appreciated that. So I'm really excited, mate, and hopefully all will go well.
Definitely, it's like one of those things with oh, is it like some journalists and stuff like that, and some commentators and their friends say to them like, "Oh, how many of these like stupid words can you fit into a headline and things like that?" Like you can always try that. See how far you could push it. For those of our listeners who aren't familiar with Matt Riley, Matt is an author. He's released three books today, and
Three
he's got
books,
a
yeah.
fourth on the way.
Mm-hmm.
He is an expert in football in Thailand. So, Matt, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, thank you. I think calling me an expert, I'm not so sure, but I'm probably obsessed with football, and my wife would agree. So yeah, basically, I've worked in Thai football for 6 years, and my most recent book, Thai Football Tales: A Beautiful Madness, recounts the surreal experiences that I've had. The first book that I took out was Kit and Caboodle: Football Shirt Stories, which I'm really proud of. Very kindly. I had Kevin Day write the foreword, and then I told the story of her game too. Two unbelievable girls from Bristol, Kaz and Lucy, that started an inclusive group where they said enough is enough. Women and girls should be allowed to have equal access to football. And then in July, I've got Kitten Community, where basically I give the platform to incredible range of people from Nairn County, where one of their fans who was 8 years old died of cancer, and his mom was trying to collect some money. Then she died of cancer, and then the shirt that they created was a combination of her favourite colours of her dress and Team Hamish and Loch Ness that supported it, mental health charities. So I'm all in on the football bandwagon, Rory. I have to say it's such an important part of my life, and I'm sure it is for lots of your listeners as well. But for me, it's a massive passion.
I love that, man. I love it so much, and you can tell how excited you are about it. And I'm exactly the same as you. It's a massive passion, but whereas my interests maybe lie in the things that could be considered a little more not as light-hearted maybe as the ones that you're into, which are quite upbeat. I'm all about the identity and the nerdy shit, to be honest. And the politics
And
behind
why
it and all
not?
this
And
stuff.
why not?
But exactly, and why not?
Yeah.
And it's the different things about football that we enjoy. But I've not read Thai Football Tales or Her Game 2, but I have got Kit and Caboodle. It's on its way. But I'm particularly
Excellent.
excited for Kit and Community because anything that's really community focused in football and the little, the stories that you don't really hear, that's what excite me the most, and that's what
Yeah.
that's the type of things that I like reading. I
Right.
saw actually one of the excerpts from it about tiny kits or tiny jerseys, I think they're called.
Yeah.
Great stuff, amazing.
Yeah, it's wonderful. The kind of groups of people, like, and again, we come back to this word passion, Rory. People like mental health football, group of people in Oldham that use football for people who are feeling low, even feeling suicidal, and having games where the score doesn't matter. You meet people, they design this wonderful shirt, which I bought. And by the way, I bought a lot of shirts, Rory. Mind, Body, and Soul, Soul, SOLE. They do unbelievable work for people who are feeling really low. And, that's the beauty of this game, Rory, is that it creates this feel-good factor. No matter win, lose, or draw, there's this wonderful, that's why I call it Kitten Community, this wonderful sense of community. And it's a real sort of mission for me that I wanted to share these and stories, and the people that wanted to share them as well. It's wonderful. I'm really proud of hopefully the way that it's going to shed light. Even a friend of mine, Cross Stitch Shirts, a guy who makes shirts from cross stitching, he did that to help his mental health, and football has so many bad news stories, but there are so many great ones out there as well, Rory.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the mental health aspect's really important. There's a similar group like that close to me. They're now based in more in Livingston and Bathgate, but they're called Kick
Mm.
Mental Health. If you're
Hmm.
from that area, please do get in touch with them if you're feeling low, need support, or just looking for something to do, some form of collective activity with other people because they're really, really fantastic and they do so much else outside of football. They run auctions for mental health charities. Livingston often get involved.
Mm.
They have support nights, they have music nights, just a whole
Mm.
host of stuff, and the community aspect of it like that is really, really, really fascinating.
It's
Um,
amazing, amazing. And
yeah.
to add to that, Mikey's line, which was set up when two friends killed that they committed suicide, and they noticed how many suicides there were in the far north of Scotland, and they said, right now we're going to set up Mikey's line, and they very kindly allowed me to interview them, and it's a wonderful part. And again, I feel like it's a part of the football that maybe is forgotten in this rush to billionaire madness in the Premier League. Football creates such wonderful value to people's lives. It's a pleasure to be connected with it, Rory.
Definitely. And it's something that you should be proud of, absolutely. Telling
Thank
these
you.
stories and sharing them is something that you should absolutely be proud of, I think. And the
Mm.
interesting thing about these is they're like a triad of lost clubs because they were basically all went defunct.
Within that 30 minutes, as I mentioned, one of them, Army United, had been around for more than a century. The other two clubs were, you probably call them plastic clubs, I suppose. TOT, known as the Hello Boys, Big Bang Chula United, which was Big Bang was an internet company. And I don't know if Big Bang is the words you want to use with your internet company,
No,
but
probably not.
they no, probably not. Definitely not. So so I had the nearest club I had. In fact, the nearest club to my house. Just to let you know, I worked for at the time one of the biggest clubs in Thailand called Mung Thong United. But the nearest club to my house was called TOT, and they were a strange club because they never had any fans. They always tried something to get fans, and it never worked. So they moved to a place called Kanchanaburi, which is 3 hours away. They shared in 2012. They shared the stadium with Mung Thong, who at the time were tremendously successful, but they just couldn't get any fans, and they were the nearest club. They were again a very odd club. They had a stadium which allegedly could get 5,000 people in, but you never saw anything like that. Even when Mung Thong were playing, Mung Thong was probably about 2 kilometers away. Even then, you wouldn't get a full crowd. So TOT was the nearest, and then Army United was the biggest. It was over a century of history, and they went bust as well. And Big Bang Chula, allegedly, I have to say allegedly a lot in football in Thailand, Rory, but allegedly they were owned by Thaksin Shinawatra, who's just been released from prison 6 months
Oh,
after he was put in there. And remarkably, the king has pardoned him for reasons we probably could discuss off the podcast. So Army United were a really large club, a long history, but always tied in with the politics. And again, Big Bang Chula were a really strange club because they didn't really, again, like TOT, didn't have a fan base. And there's a lot of clubs like that in Thailand. Rory, I used to play at the Thai Tobacco Monopoly, you had Bangkok Bank, and all these kind of, I hate to say hollow clubs, but clubs that didn't really have a soul. They kind of marched on and stumbled on for a while. But these three clubs, they all went bust within a few years of each other.
It's very, very interesting, and it's quite interesting hearing what you're saying about the clubs that don't have fans. One of the clubs
Mm.
that we covered, Stord Nordland, a club from Norway, and there was a
Mm-hmm.
few sort of intricacies about how they were founded and how they ended up coming about. I think it was something like a merger between an academy team and a sort of amateur team or something along those lines.
Mm.
But basically, they were known as the club with no soul because they had, if any, no fans coming to the games, maybe like under 100 per game, and they just had
Wow.
no support whatsoever. They were just a completely hollow club, like you said, and it's all really really quite fascinating how Thai football is kind of arranged and the different things that have happened to these clubs. So we'll start
Mm.
off with some context, I suppose, just so that our
Mm.
listeners know the kind of landscape of football in
Mhm.
Thailand. But to kick things off, you still
Mm.
stay in Thailand yourself?
No, I'm in Devon now, the People's Republic of Devon. I still keep in touch with Thailand, and I have this real feeling of kind of, I don't know, joy is probably a word. This wonderful, maybe rose tinted glasses now, to be honest, Rory, because it's been a few years.
Mm.
This feeling of the wonderful freedoms that I had in Thai football, and in a way, something I said in my book is I became invisible. So there's a guy called Nawin Chitchop who, in my view, was released Thaksin Shinawatra from prison. An unbelievably powerful man. In Thai politics, it's called the third hand, and he was always the third hand. And I think about the fact that I interviewed him. I spent time in his province, and he called himself the king of Buri Ram. And a lot of Thai football was politically focused, politically motivated, and also the politics of, let's say, making money clean. But the Thai football landscape for many years was dominated by Muang Thong, now dominated by Buri Ram, although they're not doing quite so well this year. But it will often be political money. In the north, you've got Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, particularly Chiang Rai in the Premier League. In the middle, you had Muang Thong. You've now got Bangkok United, and then you have some southern clubs as well. So there are some clubs coming through. When I first came to Thailand, all of it was Bangkok based. So at least now it's national. So you have some feeling of a national league where you support teams that are based on in a place. So, for example, Bangkok Glass is now being called Pathum United. Pathum is the area. It was very hard to cheer to cheer a glass manufacturer. I mean, how do you get passionate about a glass manufacturer for Singapore?
It's interesting though because it sounds like a lot of these clubs presumably started off as work teams, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
because, as you say, there was money involved, that's where the money came from, and they were
Mm.
founded as such. So yeah, it's just quite interesting hearing this and for our listeners to know how Thai football looks, I suppose, and what the sort of layout of it is. Not to
Yeah.
get into it too much. So you've
Mm.
mentioned the big hitters, you've mentioned how it operates, I suppose. So where you lived, there was these three teams that
Mm.
that were about a half hour walk away from where you stayed, roughly all
Yeah,
three of them.
half hour drive. Yeah, yeah. Although in
Half hour
traffic, for
drive.
those who've been to Bangkok, I'm saying 30 minutes. It could be 4 hours, but generally speaking, it was 30 minutes.
Okay. And they all went defunct within a few
Mm.
years of each other, which is quite interesting. So I want to start with TOT, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they're quite interesting. So my understanding is TOT were founded in the 50s as
Mm-hmm.
Telecom of Thailand. So again, another works team or another team with money behind them from the telecom firms.
Mm.
And then they dissolved in 2016. So it's still quite a long
Mm-hmm.
history, or is it as simple as that? Was there a lot of
Mm.
folding and, kind of going defunct before then? Was there any ownership disputes?
Well, one of the things about TOT was interesting is they were actually a founder of the Thai Premier League. So they had some kind of profile and they had some kind of power. So they did okay, but they were beaten by another forgotten team called Bangkok Bank FC in the semi-finals of the Championship playoff. So this kind of was the peak. So this is one of these clubs where, in a very very small pond in the 90s, they were a big fish. But as the pond got bigger, when Buriram came in fact, Buriram is an interesting one because they had a club called a UTIA, PET, a UTIA, which was the electrical authority. And essentially, they just took the license and they moved it from a UTIA to Buriram. So, to give you an idea, it's like having someone in Cornwall and then you're in Carlisle. So, TOT were at the time they didn't realize what was going on around them. They thought they'd always be this kind of relatively powerful group. They had the stadium at the headquarters of TOT, but things moved on around them. They even played in the Asian Championship as well.
Wow.
But TOT basically were blindsided by the big increase, and I was lucky to be there at the time. The big increase in Thai football, and they just didn't see it coming. They didn't legislate for it, and then you ended up with this very strange kind of, like you often get in Thai football, Rory, is a club on wheels.
I see.
Kanchanaburi, as I mentioned earlier, is 3 hours away, and somebody in their wisdom decided you're going to move 3 hours and expect that someone's going to support TOT. They probably don't even understand or know, and get a crowd. And of course, then that fails. They have 1 year or nearly a year and a half at Mung Thong United. And when you used to go and watch Mung Thong, there was, or TOT, there was virtually no fans. And then they hired the National Stadium, with 60, I think 63,000 fans, and they get less than 1,000 fans. And I remember that in 2012, thinking, this is madness. How much are you paying for the National Stadium? And as a percentage, what is it? Was it 1%, less than 1% that it's full? So TOT are a great example in how not to run a football club and how not to be aware of what the market around you is doing.
It's a difficult one, and well, I mean, it's not a difficult one to be honest. It's a difficult one for the fans, but from the perspective that we look at,
Mm,
they took this club from where I suppose was their spiritual home, if you want to call it that, their historic home, hugely
mm,
historic club if they founded the Thai League and were
mm,
involved in that.
mm,
Amongst other things, they've been around for a very, very long time, so they've obviously got a huge amount of history behind them. And then they just moved them hundreds of miles away. So
mm.
of course no one's going to end up supporting them, and of course they're going to completely drop out of existence because you've taken away one of the things that made them what they were. They've taken away part of their identity and the identity of supporters. The one thing that I wanted to go back to is something that you mentioned there. You mentioned that in Thai football there was this big change, and this led to a lot of clubs sort of finding it difficult or sort of going
Mm.
against the grain in some ways. So what was that change? What happened that kind of made things a little trickier for some clubs?
I think one of the big things was we went through, I think it was 3 coups when we were in Thailand, and there were massive political behemoths, like now in
I
Chitchob,
see.
but also people like my second club I worked for called Supambri, a guy called Varawat Silpa Archer. So his dad was the Prime Minister of Thailand, and both Newin and Top's dad were banned from politics. So they decided that they would use football as a political tool but not call it the political tool. So Top or Varawat Silparacha was very open. The province of Supambri, he said the football club basically drove his political profile. He's now in the Thai cabinet. He's
Mm,
minister for the environment. And so the big change was all these political beasts with millions, billions of dollars. I mean, the money is Rory, unbelievable money. They were diverting it into football from politics, but clubs like TOT, there were smaller clubs like BEC, Tero, all these kind of clubs. They were blindsided by this massive ocean of money. And people like Mung Thong United, who were politically connected, they were getting they were getting Robbie Fowler, they were
yeah.
getting players that had played for England to sign up because of the money they had, and they were left in the kind of backwash of the
Mm,
old days because with TOT they had played in the Asian Cup in 94, 95, but after that they were completely left behind. So politics banned politicians with too much time on their hands and let's just say several £1 million to deal with and
mm,
find homes for. Chiang Rai, sorry, was exactly the same. That was all politics as well. Massive stadium, my favorite stadium in Thailand. Um, and then again, people like Bot TOT were totally isolated, blindsided, and isolated.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's bizarre, and I think it's really important what you say there, though, that when people who are involved in politics decide they want to use football and they have all this money and they have all this power, then things
Mm,
very, very quickly become a bit of a farce. And it's
mm,
the thing is, and they'll say it's this reason, they'll say it's that reason. It's very, very transparent,
mm,
And obviously, you mentioned it as well. There was a number of coups that were within Thailand, and that must have
mm.
been terrifying for so many people for so many reasons,
Gosh, yeah.
and horrible. It's a lot of political context there as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's entirely understandable, and of course, as we've been over in other episodes, the football and the football teams suffer for it, and
Mm,
this can end up happening. So yeah, that's the story of TOT, and obviously, as you said,
mm,
it's a shame that that's their story is that they helped found the Thai League, very historic club, very big club.
mm,
They played in the Asian Cup, or sorry, no,
mm.
sorry, the Asian Champions League,
Interpreted,
and
yeah.
then they just yeah, then that happens, they get moved away, and things start falling away. It's a bit of a
Yeah.
shame. Were you staying in
Mm.
Thailand at the time they folded?
No, so no, we've gone by then. We've been out of
Hmm.
Thailand by we've been out of Thailand for 7 years now.
Okay.
So we didn't see it fold. I mean, the other thing about it, Rory, as well, is the perfect location, man. You know, where we live, this place called Laxi Plaza. There's so many people. It's so easy to get to, and now there's a monorail there. You know, it's if you were to put a new club in a place, this would be the place that you would put that club. But again, you don't have that idea of identity of location. It was so many poor mistakes. Even the training center was about 2 hours, or maybe an hour and a half in traffic just to get to it. And you think, who thought of that? Where's the logic to that? You know,
Yeah,
don't make any sense at all.
I know. And the thing is, though, as well, you can sometimes, it's not just Thailand, you can see here as well with a lot of the
Mm,
decisions that are taken and made, and things just don't make sense to anyone whatsoever.
no,
Yeah, just one of those things. I totally understand that as well. But
yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's the story of TOT and
Mm,
unfortunately how they went under. So moving on to the next one, Big Bang Chula. Quite
mm.
an interesting one, this. And, I want to hear everything that you're allowed to say. And remember that keyword allegedly.
Yes, allegedly is always good, isn't it? I love the Big Bang idea. I mean, there was a road called Changwatana near where we lived, and it was one of these real throwback stadiums where you went through a housing estate, and in the middle of it was this real old school stadium. They had some good coaches over the year. There was obviously a lot of money. There was a guy called the Thai Zico, Kiatasuk Senam Wang, who became the national coach. But the level of facilities, the pitch, the quality of the game was never decent. And again, excuse me, and again, this was one of these clubs that was just left behind. Again, in a good location. They were founded in 1976. They were called Bang Toy Football Team. Then in 2004, they changed the name again to 2000 in 2008, and then they settled eventually on Big Bang, their sponsor, and it was actually on the front of their shirt. And I wish I'd have bought that shirt, Rory, I have to say. So they were really successful in the late 90s under the name of Sintana Football Club. They won the Thai League One title. Now, the Core Royal Cup is their charity shield. So it's the league winners against the FA Cup winners. And they also won an FA Cup. So imagine if you've got a team like that who've got that kind of level of success that just faded and faded away. And, your book's called Forgotten Clubs. I always think that this is a half remember club, even when it was there, because I would go to these games when I worked for Mungtong and I worked for Sapambury, the provincial club, and people just had no idea it was there, just off this big road, Changwatana. But they kept trying to change their name. They kept trying to find a reason. They were called the Pink Panthers, which is a bit of an odd nickname, and they kept trying to work out what they were going to do. And it was a real failure, and it just faded and faded and faded. And eventually, they decided they just couldn't pay for it anymore, and they went bust as well.
It's a real shame, but again, it's very, very interesting to hear because of the different elements and the different aspects that are involved in it. And of course, as you said, for this club, sort of half remembered. And that was one thing that I actually picked up on was that this club has folded and founded so many times under so many different names, but still
Mm,
kind of continued to be or continued to claim at least to be the same iteration of that original club.
yeah,
Which is really, really interesting. And
yeah.
uh
Yeah, and
big
they staggered on until 2017, but staggered is the key word because,
mm,
we've been basically that's when we left Thailand. And I would have been amazed that it was still around as we left. It was, again, it was lucky that it had a really good location. They had a university on Changwatana. They had lots of places to live, but they were just, I think a lot of it, I think about the marketing, Rory, of TOT and Big Bang. You just think, what are you giving the fans? And fans just thought, I don't need this. What do there's nothing here. Poor seating, poor pitches, poor play. And 2017, even they thought we just can't carry on.
yeah, but I think one of the things that you mentioned there, though, the fans just thought we don't need this anymore. I think that's really important as well, and it's something that I think we've probably touched on in previous episodes, but not really went into too much. And I think that goes to show that when you take something and you're just constantly changing, there's
Mm,
obviously constant chaos and strife happening behind the scenes of a football club, and it's clear that the club is being used as a vehicle for something else, people just
Mm.
get fed up and people just abandon it. Like it's very, very easy for fans to do that.
Absolutely. And in Thailand, of course, you've got all these dodgy feeds for the English Premier League on a roadside stall, and you're watching this fantastic quality football, but the team that you're just round the corner from are producing really poor quality football that doesn't excite you. And of course, there's no switching costs for customers. The fans don't need to do that. And again, there's that plastic kind of club feel about Big Bang Chula. And it's such a shame because, again, it was a good location. You'd look at the amount of people living around it, but it was just the idea that they just didn't see what they needed to do to improve the quality of what they were doing. And they couldn't compete with, for example, Bangkok Glass. They're owned by Singapore Corporation. You think about Muang Thong United, they're owned by the biggest media company in Thailand. And Newin has got unlimited money for Buriram. He owns part of Leicester City. He owns a thing called Central Processing Food. He owns part of 7-Eleven. So really, they were just blown out of the water. And I think it's a shame, as an Exeter City fan, small clubs have a lot to offer.
Definitely, and I think that's something else that a lot of people take for granted a little bit is that you do need to try it, and I understand that there's this element of, well, I'm only going to go once and I'm never going to go again, so why bother?
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. But that's the other thing as well, Rory, about Thai football. The event, the
mm,
family connection to football it's really intriguing and it's really attractive. Even if the football's not very good, they'll have met 3 or 4 hours before. They have a family picnic. There'll be the joint bottle of Sangsong whiskey, and the football in a way was a sideshow, and they still couldn't make it work. It's almost an achievement to fail with some of these clubs.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Though, if you're further down the tiers, you go for the spectacle, you go for the atmosphere. It's a better day
Mm.
out.
Mm.
Outside of the SPFL in Scotland, you can have a pint at the games. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? It's
Yeah,
and that's what it's all about.
yeah,
It's just better, it's cheaper, etc., etc. And I can imagine it's the same in Thailand as well. So we
yeah.
have one club who was moved away and went
Mm.
defunct. We have this other club who was formed and dissolved and formed and dissolved and a whole bunch of stuff happening around there. Was Big Bang
Yeah.
Chula the club that you mentioned? There was some other probably nastier elements involved, I think is maybe the right word to use.
Yes, there usually are with Thai football. It's always claim and counter claim, but with Big Bang Chula, the ownership again connected to Thaksin Shinawatra, the recently released from prison ex-MP, who is going to do extremely well in the near future. There are always claims and counterclaims and hidden stories behind it, but essentially the money that financed the team, because for a while they were getting really good players, they were getting they were able to attract foreign players because for many years, again, I think one of the key things about TOT and Big Bang is that they were popular when foreign players didn't come. When foreign players did come and they had to pay more money, that's when they started to fall by the wayside. But
Mm.
if you scratch the surface of any Thai club, you'll find some allegedly interesting stories, Rory. That is for sure.
I suppose it's the same as any other club in the world. Let's be
Yeah.
honest. Well, I mean, to an extent, look at the Premier League, right? You dig
Mm.
underneath there, you're going to have seedy elements. It's
Oh,
absolutely everywhere. It's not just isolated to Thailand
oh,
and other places,
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I
yeah.
always just like to add that caveat in there, just so people are aware. Well, that's two of the three clubs that we've covered so
Mm.
far, and this has been quite a good whip round and quite a good insight. What about Army FC? Very, very historic club, very old club.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that they were born from the army.
Mm. Yeah, they were. It was known as the Royal Thai Army Stadium. This was the furthest away from my house, about 30 minutes drive. And I always remember in the searing heat, there used to be this sticky running track, and my feet would stick to it. And I remember one game when someone had missed a goal, and I decided I would catch it and kick the ball back, and my shoe just absolutely separated into its constituent parts. They were really powerful. When Barcelona came over to Thailand in 2013, they trained there before they spanked the Thai All Stars 7-1, which, by the way, was a really bad idea. That goes down extremely badly with Thais and losing face. They also signed a strategic partnership deal, which I alwaise blanch at Rory because when I worked at Muntong, we had a memorandum of understanding with Atletico Madrid, and the understanding was that we gave them money and they did nothing. But
Interesting.
in but in 2013 they signed a strategic partnership deal with Leicester City, and you see lots of connections with Leicester City, as I mentioned, through Neoin Chitchop at Buri Ram. There's lots and lots of Thai politicians that are connected to that. But they're a really strange one, Rory, because they were really, really powerful. But their kind of tide went in and out based on, in Thailand, we've got the yellow shirts, so the royalists, and the red shirts that will tend to be the urban poor, which Thaksin Shinawatra managed to get the votes from.
Hmm.
And the army was seen as part of the yellow shirts. And for many, many years, they had tremendous power. They had the former Thai national coach, Mano Polking, who's a superb coach, has just been absolutely destroyed by the Thai politics, and he lost his job. We had Matty Elliott, the former Leicester guy. You had Gary Stevens that was coaching them for a short while as well. They did really well. They won the league in 2004-05. But the problem was, again, it's Thai army. You know, going out to support the army is not so easy. It's called a place called Vipavadi Rangsit. If it was Vipavadi Rangsit FC, you have the locals, you know, because you had the Thai Army Boxing Club on the same site. It's really hard for them to get a group of people who wanted to feel an affinity with the club when the army have done, let's just say, all kinds of interesting things over the years that we were there, the 16 years that we were in Thailand.
Yeah, it's a really important point too. Some people, some of our listeners might have seen clubs from around the world. I know there's a lot of clubs in, I suppose, sort of North and Western Africa with names like Police FC,
Mm,
Armed Forces FC, etc. And literally, the clubs do come from the armed forces. Some of the first football clubs in Scotland and Britain were from regiments. You know, it was
mm,
a way of keeping fit. It's probably the
uh,
same in Thailand. You know, it happens. It's
mm,
a way for soldiers to keep fit, and it's just ended up becoming a professional football club. But
mm,
though they're old, though they're historic, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're popular, especially if you are in a country which has a really sort of checkered past with military coups, with army
mm,
oppression, etc., etc. You know, can probably see
mm,
where I'm going with this. On top of that, it's just a very, it's both a very blatant and a very difficult way to give an identity to
mm,
supporters and to give yourself an identity if you are a supporter. Because if you say you support Army United, then that is a very blatant act of support for one thing, or not. I hope that makes
yeah,
sense. I know I get
yeah, I
sort of a little
definitely
lost for
agree.
words,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, you know what I'm saying.
definitely. You're making a statement by turning up. Now there were actually strangely in that area for Poverty Ranks, there was actually a lot of foreign fans, and I remember another Scottish friend of mine. We called Scholesy, Paul Murphy. I used to play football with. But the two things that really hamstrung them, first of all, they decided because they were army, they'd have no foreign players, and at first they felt like this was the right thing to do. But when so much money came into Thai football, the level of foreign players really changed the whole landscape of football. And the second was, again, related to what you said, Rory, is that soldiers will be dragooned into the watching the games. So you're looking at a game and you've got maybe 1,500, 2,000 fans, but you've got about 3,000 dragoons, soldiers who basically don't want to be there, who are forced to be there, and you feel like you're in some kind of North Korean pageant.
Nuts, absolutely crazy. And this really comes back to what you had called your book. Actually, it's a beautiful madness because you have all these
Mm,
things. Thailand, I've never been myself, but by all accounts, by people I know who have went, Thailand is a beautiful country. The people are
mm,
absolutely amazing, incredibly
mm.
friendly people, and the football sounds great to watch as well. But there's just
Yeah.
all these things going on in the background that you just think, man, like, yes, it's good to tell a story, and it is a bit of a beautiful madness. But if they manage
Mm,
to get their act together a little bit,
yeah.
then imagine the kind of football powerhouse that it could be.
Yeah, and I feel like that sentence will be repeated for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And I think really you have to kind of accept the paradox. You know, you look at Army. In fact, Army were really helpful. I was on Fox Sports Central a few times, and I tried to get highlights, and they could see the potential. But this, unfortunately, this oversight is so amateurish that you never get this idea of a professional and consistent approach to promoting the league in totality. You know, you've got this massive gap, a little bit like England, but massive gap between the top league and the second league. People who come up from the second league nearly always get relegated. You know for sure that the top 5 or 6 teams will almost be the same, or nearly always be the same. And it is a beautiful madness, but there's a comfort in accepting it, Rory. You know, when I realised the Thai complex, almost like a dance that you have to go through, when I realised that there were things going on behind the scenes that perhaps lowered my expectations, shall we say. But then you just accept it. You know, it is wonderful. You go to a game and it's £3 and a beer's 75 pence to a pound. You go to places like Bangkok Glass or now put to Pathum Thani, and you know you're almost forced to have beer. I remember going to Pathum Thani, and the guy in front of us was told they couldn't bring water, but we could bring a bottle of whiskey and soda. And you just think this is crazy but wonderful.
For every like everyone else, it's a spectacle, isn't it? And it's a day out,
Yeah.
and you know, it's great. It's great hearing things like that. It's just really fascinating, and I really
Mm.
enjoy it. So
Mm.
yeah, so there's a story of all of these three clubs. Now,
Mm.
from what we've said, we can kind of guess what happened to them in terms of how they ended up folding. But
Mm.
we'll start again from the beginning. TOT,
Yeah.
what was the final nail in the coffin?
I think the final nail in the coffin was essentially their worst, their terrible form in the league. In fact, strangely enough, as part of the book, I mentioned that when I worked for Supambury, we qualified for the Asian Champions League, and we're the only team, to my knowledge, that were kicked out of the Asian Champions League before playing. And there's a long story involving going on holiday with my wife and getting a phone call from the AFC. But on that year, TOT only won 3 games out of 32. And the one game they won was allowed Supambury to win the place in the championship. We didn't win the league. I think we came third that year. So with TOT, it was the fact that once they went down, there was nothing left to promote them back into the Premier League. And the powers that be said, you know, it's just not working. It's just not feasible. Essentially, it was kind of a works team for a while, and they just said, you know, we just can't do it. They had some foreign players. There's a guy called Bad Savage who played in a lot of teams in the UK. Lovely guy, got to know him really well. Played for Brighton 36 times, played for Tranmere Rovers, played for Northampton, and he ended up playing for TOT 79 times. But he was constantly frustrated. I used to meet him for coffees and he wouldn't get paid some months. And the TOT hierarchy said, look, we'll pay you at some point, but we're not going to satisfy your contract. So for TOT, it was the idea that they got absolutely destroyed that season. They had a Derby County season or a Villa season one year, and there was no way back because you know no one wanted to invest in them to come back to the Premier League.
Really fascinating, man. It's just so interesting hearing all these different things and all these sort of events, I guess, and
Mm-hmm.
um different happenings that have led to these clubs falling out of the league and the Premier League being
Mm-hmm.
the way that it is as well. So that was what happened to TOT.
Yeah,
And that's how they eventually ended up falling out of the league and unfortunately becoming defunct. So we'll move
yeah.
on again to the next one. What about Big Bang Chula? Do you think it was just a case that the amount of foundings and refoundings just caused fans to eventually pack it in and they had no money and they didn't see the point in continuing? Or was there, you know, other things at play that kind of stopped them from continuing?
I've always felt, Rory, that one of the things was the land value. You know, this road, Changwatana, it was developing incredibly rapidly, and the land value was increasing so quickly that when people looked at this stadium with, I'll be honest, there were times when there were probably hundreds rather than thousands there. They realized that there just wasn't any point, and Big Bang started to think, I don't want to keep sponsoring this team. And you know, when you call Big Bang Chula and Big Bang don't want to connect with you, it makes it very difficult to carry on. So they
Hmm.
just became irrelevant, and in a way, it was some kind of evolution of Thai football, if you like. Those teams fell away. The Bangkok Banks fell away. The Thai tobacco monopoly fell away, and Big Bang were part of that. So they fizzled out, as we said, in 2017 without any Big Bang, you could say. And I'm sure now there'll be a shopping mall because if you do ever go to Bangkok, Rory, it's all about the shopping malls,
Mhm.
and that land will definitely be used by developers and various other people. So yeah, it just became irrelevant. It was a really strange one as well, because I always remember going to that stadium in league matches for both clubs that I worked for, and it felt like you were out in the countryside, but you're only 5 minutes away from this massive landlocked and traffic snarled Changwatana, which had all of these enormous shopping centres on. So yeah, I think it became irrelevant. It became too much of a burden in a way, reflecting what happened to TOT.
Yeah, that's probably one that I think I'm gonna go and look into more. I quite I mean, it sounds really bad. I'm fascinated with this idea that they just became irrelevant. You know,
Mm,
I'm really interested in this notion that they almost just kind of fell out of memory and just didn't become a thing. They just weren't loved anymore or whatever. I find it really, really fascinating. I think that's something that I'd encourage all listeners to go and look into, because a lot of the
mm,
themes that we cover in terms of identity and heritage all play into that, and the fact that they just became irrelevant almost overnight,
mm,
to me anyway, is really, really fascinating. And we've just
yeah.
touched on them anyway, but we'll go over it again. Army United, what was their nail in the coffin? What was the death blow?
For me, I think Rory was incompetence. When I got to work closely with Army United and talk to some of the people that were running the club, it absolutely stunned me, I have to say. They wanted the best and they wanted to do well, but they had absolutely no idea. And it also speaks to the hierarchical nature of Thai culture. So when Supambri, that I worked for, were kicked out of the Asian Champions League, when I got a call from the AFC in Singapore, they said, "Look, you have to tell your president that we're going to kick you out unless you." We didn't have a roof on one side, we didn't have all-seater stadium, but it can't happen in Thai football. You cannot ever criticise those above you. So I think with Army United, there was this in-baked incompetence combined with the hierarchical structure of Thai football, and it was never going to end well. It was again, it was a very, very popular area, lots and lots of condos and places to live, but the people that were running that club were so amateurish, Rory, and they essentially didn't know what they were doing, and they threw away a century of history for the sake of perhaps a rebrand, perhaps calling it Vipavadi Ranks FC or something like that. And now it's gone.
That's another really interesting one, and I think, said at the beginning of the episode, we could do an entire episode on other lost Thai clubs and Thai football in general
Oh yeah.
and the history of it, particularly. I would love to do an episode specifically on Army FC, because I think
Mm,
that's brilliant as well. And we've done episodes on Palermo and Cesena come to mind, the two clubs from Italy, because it's like they obviously, Matt, you've got Her Game 2, you've got Thai Football
mhm,
Tales, which I suppose are sort of not in isolation, but they're sort of stories in their own rights. And you've
mm,
got two books on football kits. The first one, Kit and Caboodle, and
mm,
the one that's going to be coming out soon, Kit and Community. So we'll just
mm.
start at the very beginning. Kit and Caboodle, how did it come about, and what was your impetus to write it, I suppose?
Yeah, for me, Rory, it's the idea that there's this kind of almost patronizing view that kits are just simply things that you wear and they don't have any other purpose. And the fact that kits are often seen as just ways to milk the fans into paying ridiculous amounts of money for overpriced polyester. So I started to think, and I started to talk to friends of mine. There's actually a better story, a bigger story there, that shirts have got an ability to show what our tribe in a perhaps in a negative way, but also tell the story of things that are important to us. So I was really lucky that Kevin Day from Price of Football was really passionate about it. He did the foreword, and I started to sort of talk to people, even my local town here in Exmouth. For example, they had when the Russians first invaded Ukraine, they were one of the clubs that used the Ukrainian flag colors, and I started to think that there's bigger, better stories here than how many shirts you sell. Again, with things like mental health, things like the idea that you're helping LGBTQ plus groups, and also only in Thailand, the fact that Newin Chitchop in Buriram makes his own shirts. He doesn't even think about getting other people to make them for him. So to help the local community and obviously give himself more power. So yeah, that was the start of it, Rory, and it made me realise that shirts are incredibly important messages about things, not just the club, but ourselves. They reflect a lot on ourselves. And if you look at the, the dozens of shirts I've got, it says a lot about me.
Definitely. I think that's really, really important to mention. And again, we've danced around the themes ourselves quite a bit. But I was
Mm.
actually having a discussion with our friend Gus Stevens, who runs the Bestuelifa account, I
Oh,
think
yeah.
it's called, the Icelandic football Twitter account. And we were actually discussing, he's compiled a big list and a big graphic of all these lost clubs from Iceland with all their badges
Mm.
on them. And he said, there's just some clubs that don't have a badge. And
Mm.
we kind of, went ended up going down this rabbit hole of badges are such key identifiers for football club because it gives fans and teams an identity. The
Mm.
identity of the club is rooted in the badge.
Mm.
And you saw it when loads of Premier League clubs were modernising their badges. They're losing this, element because they're going for more of a marketing and brand perspective as opposed to a
Mm.
club crest or badge. So, we were discussing, what did people identify with before badges? And we said, well, there'd be kits and it would be the kit's colours.
Mm.
What colours are you? And we said scarves, and but well, not everyone could afford a scarf, particularly in the 40s and 50s and things like that. They weren't really a thing. But
Mm.
it was the kits and it's the colours that they identified with. That was the identity of the football club, and therefore it was the identity of the supporter because those were the colours that you supported, and eventually it's the colours that you yourself could wear. And I think that's really important that these things, the colours, the scarves, the jerseys, the badges, these are all things that anchor football fans to their clubs and keep them in
Definitely.
there. And those are the things
Absolutely.
where all of the history, the heritage, the identity of the club is. And again, I think it's really, really fascinating. It's a really, really important thing. But additionally, we probably seen it on our Twitter because we're waiting for it.
Hmm.
We're waiting for them Victoria Park Vixens to finally drop their two kits, their home and away kits, because they look absolutely stunning. And even though they might be a bit pricier, you know that the money's not going towards a JD partnership. It's not going
Yeah.
towards this, like Man City or anything. It's going towards a
Mm.
club who are rooted in their community and are doing really good things for their community to provide an inclusive football team. So I think there's
Yeah.
something really nice in that as well. And I think that's what you were trying to reflect in Kit and Caboodle, that there's so much more to football kits, and there always has been, than just these are your
Mm.
colours, these are your
Definitely.
stripes, you know?
My first three words in the book, Rory, are I love football. And it's this idea that it's almost like, hi, Matt, I'm an alcoholic or whatever it might be, just say it. We love football. I look at, my Saturdays with my friends and the meeting in the pub and doing the same things and standing in the same place on the big bank at Exeter. It's almost that it's been forgotten that there is a love, and what is a love? It's a connection over a number of years. There's a love there. I got a shirt today from St. Pauli on Sea, Love is Love shirt, which I wrote about in Kit and Caboodle. And you do feel that connection, this wonderful connection, because every time you walk out, I went to the last City game, unfortunately beaten heavily by Derby, wearing a Federation of Micronesia shirt. And I put it on Twitter and I said, I think I'm the only person wearing it. And someone said, oh, I think that's absolutely definitely not right. Then it turned out the person that had produced the shirt lives half an hour from me, and he would have also been at Exeter against Derby wearing a Micronesia shirt, but he had football training. These stories are amazing, Rory, and there's so many of them through football shirts.
Yeah, definitely. I love football. I love that. And yeah, it's just we need to just say it, we need to just accept that all these big conversations we have, all these in-depth chats about all these really complex themes, it all
Mm.
just comes back to those three words, and I think there's a beauty in that as well. But yeah,
Mm.
no, it's like so I bought a Corinthians top off of Depop earlier
Oh,
on.
fantastic! They're in my
Yeah.
they're in there my next one, yeah, as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so me and my friend Jack, we have had this sort of challenge, I suppose, on Football Manager. Whenever
Mm.
we win a major trophy with whatever team we're managing, we either need to buy a jersey or we need to buy a pennant of the team that we've been managing. So that's where that's come from. So it's great to be
Mm.
able to add it to the collection. And it's they're just really, really nice kits, and it's, I suppose,
Yeah,
thinking about it, that's another kit from another continent that I've got.
yeah,
And it's just fascinating thinking about it.
yeah.
That's Kit and Caboodle.
Yep.
Obviously, recommend all of our listeners to buy it. I'm really looking forward to reading it when it comes.
Thank
You
you.
followed that up with Her Game 2, which is
Yep.
a really, really fantastic story, and one that certainly deserved the credit that it got.
Mm. Thank you. Yeah, because I met Kaz and Lucy again, Exeter City. They came over. They're massive Bristol Rovers fans, and I love the fact that they're not looking for negotiation or mediation. They're just saying, no, not having it. I am not having it. I'm a woman who likes football. You accept that, or I would call you out on it. And I love them to bits for that. They very kindly invited myself and my wife Karen to Birmingham for their first anniversary. Met Callum Best there, who was also a real big advocate of what they're doing, and they very kindly let me tell their story. And I had some amazing experiences. I interviewed the first woman who coached a European club in the Faroe Islands. My wife and I were on holiday in Cornwall, and she's in the Faroe Islands doing a live chat to me through FaceTime, getting her kit ready to go out in minus goodness knows what. So I was really proud, and Tracy Crouch very kindly did the foreword to that. I was really proud to sort of lay that story down, or at least to be able to share that story, because I love the fact that they're not looking for negotiation. They're saying, no, I'm not having it. We're a woman. We're women. We love football. You deal with it right now, because this is the way we're doing it. We are wanting this equality, and we're not going to ask. We're going to tell. And it's a great. I love them. I love them to bits. They're wonderful people.
Yeah, yeah, it's fantastic, and it's a fantastic initiative, fantastic story, and a fantastic concept as well. One that's important, and one that I think all people, particularly men, should be looking to follow and looking to do themselves. If there is sexism or misogyny or
Mm-hmm.
transphobia or homophobia at a football game, you call it out, and you call it
Mm-hmm.
out there and then, and strictly as well, because it shouldn't be accepted, and it's not acceptable. And
No.
these are the things that exclude people from a game which should be inclusive and all inclusive as well.
Thai society is incredibly welcoming like that, and the hatred and the ridiculous bile that you see on Twitter is one thing, but the fact that there's this massive market of people who are passionate about football, it's a wonderful opportunity for football to grow.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and it's actually something that I'd not thought about before. But yeah, it's simple stuff, and football clubs and male supporters of clubs need to do a lot better in that regards, and just as I said, in terms of calling out and making sure that football's a safe space for everyone that's involved and everyone that wants to be involved in it. Importantly, so
Definitely.
once you had written Her Game Too, we of
Mm-hmm.
course moved on to your latest publication,
Mm,
which was the theme of our episode today, really.
mm,
Thai football, a beautiful, sorry, Thai football tales, a beautiful madness. I know I'd missed a word
mm.
out there. So obviously inspired by you living in Thailand and really just telling some of your favorite stories from living there and attending football games there.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And really, I wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for COVID. I just sort of had that chance to think about it and look back on it and really process it, Rory, because even now I feel like I'm still processing stuff, this guy in Chit Chop is probably the most powerful man in the country, and I include the king in that. And I'm there, been driven up to Buriram by his assistant, spend the day with him, and the things that happened, the things that I went through were just astonishing. And that COVID time gave me a chance just to kind of reflect on it and think, that beautiful madness idea. And my first chapter is called A Love Letter for Thai Football, because it's really important, Rory, that I don't want people to think I'm condescending, patronizing. There's corruption and there's all kind of things that might jar people. But the whole experience was just an absolute wonderful privilege to be part of, because I was essentially the only Westerner that saw these things. I almost became invisible. The things I saw, Rory, I kept thinking, you must know I'm in the room seeing this, but they trusted me and they knew I wouldn't say anything. And there's a lot of things I haven't put in the book, because that trust to a Thai, particularly politician, is incredibly important. And it was a lovely story to tell. It's so energizing to hear people say nice things about it, because again, it's from the heart and it is a love letter to Thai football.
Yeah. And importantly, there, what you said is it's about processing all these different things that happen. Like football in a lot of places can be a reasonably small community. I think if you go down the I suppose the further down the tiers you go in Scotland, it becomes a pretty small community. A lot of people know a lot of people, and football's like that everywhere. And I think when you go to countries where football maybe isn't a national sport, it's not really as big as it is over in the West and stuff like that. It's quite easy to think, oh, all you've done is meet the owner of this football club from Thailand. Who cares? You know what I mean? They're small, but it's not true. Like, you're meeting some really, really important people. These are people within the community who are highly respected, highly regarded, have some modicum of power. And you know that just because you've not heard of them and just because you don't understand the sport they're involved in doesn't mean they're no one, and you still have
No,
a level of trust to
yeah,
them. And Yeah, I think
Mm.
it's important you put in there a love letter to Thai football. Absolutely, I think is the perfect way to go about it.
Thank you. Yeah, and a lot of coaches that came over from the UK, I would say, look, you have to act in this way. You can't be confrontational, can't be aggressive. Very few of them realize that, and they paid with their jobs. You have to accept that there are things that are very different. There's this thing that I mentioned in the book called Gren Jai, where essentially face saving exercise. If you accept that, you'll never be forgotten. But if you don't accept it, you'll never be forgiven.
Coming on to your next book that's going to be coming out hopefully soon, and one that I'm certainly very,
Mhm.
very excited about.
Thank
It's
you.
going to be Kit and Community,
Yeah.
which is really going through all of the. It's going to be talking about football kits again, but whereas it
Mm,
doesn't really talk about it from the sort of wider perspective with
mm.
sort of other stories, it's really going to be taking a focus on the people who are really making things happen, the unique things, the unique stories revolving around football kits.
Absolutely. Getting back to your point about your Corinthians shirt, my 20th chapter is called Corinthians Wearing Their Hearts on Their Sleeve. And Corinthians UK were really kind with their time to talk about that. But I really love the fact that I've got Kieran Maguire writing the forward. I've got John Nicholson from Football 365 writing the first chapter. It's the story. So the big story, the first story for me is about one of our former players, Exeter City's Adam Stansfield, died of cancer at 31. Absolutely heartbreaking. He was a wonderfully loved player. He left three children behind. And when he died, the shirts that were given to his mum and dad, Roger and Gig, were the stories of his career. And then fast forward a few more years, people may know his son, Jay Stansfield, came to play for Exeter City last year, played for a season on loan from Fulham. On May the 7th, he scored a hat trick. The stories that they tell, the shirts tell, are wonderful. The guy that you mentioned, who tiny jerseys from America, up Pompney, where you've got this Mark Watson's brother, Paul Watson, who decided he was going to go over to Micronesia to see if he could be an international. All the shirts that they've got, and I've got a lot of Micronesian shirts, Rory, they all finance football. And, this story is about the stories that I give a platform to rather than my stories. And I love the fact that I've taken a step back and I said, right, guys, it's over to you. Rock and roll football shirts, the idea of the gambling. I've met with gamblers. What's it called? Which one was it now? It was Gambling with Lives. And even Kieran's podcast, they designed a shirt which also gave money to Gambling with Lives and talking about the story of how they were designed it, how Kevin and Kieran designed it. So I'm really proud of this. I'm proud of all my books, but I love the fact that essentially of all the chapters, there are 23 platforms that I give to great stories. And I just listen, I write, and I share.
Yes, and that's what we love about it. I would always rather talk about those stories and small community ran initiatives. It's community, it's
Yeah,
football, that's what it's about. It's for people, it's
definitely.
for the fans, and that's what it should be for.
Absolutely. And taking the back seat, there's people like football shirts for charity. Absolutely amazing couple of people that Tanya and Jamie, they raise huge amounts of money for three cancer charities. My mum unfortunately died of cancer. And this idea that football shirts have this massive power to not just tell a story, but to make a difference and educate people. Again with the Adam Stansfield Foundation, I'm wearing their bracelet now. It's about bowel cancer and educating people about bowel cancer. And how do they raise the funds from that? They raise it by selling shirts and promoting shirts from lots of professional players. I just find this wonderful, Rory, and incredibly sort of at times almost overwhelming because they've saved people's lives. It's not an exaggeration that football shirts in these contexts have saved people's lives, and that's just wonderful.
I completely agree, and it's telling the story of them and making sure that other people have heard about it as well, and give inspiration for other people who are looking to embark on similar projects or do similar
Mm,
things, and it all just kind of really nicely comes full circle, I suppose, and um, yeah, it's football and it becomes more football, and it's about football helping people and as you say, it's saving people's lives, and
mm,
yeah, it's a brilliant thing, but. That has
mm.
been absolutely fantastic talking to you this evening. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been great
My
hearing
pleasure.
stories about football in Thailand and how you came about writing your books. Is there anything else you'd want to say or mention or talk about just before we finish up for tonight?
Just really, Rory, that all royalties that I create go to the mighty Exeter City Women. Karen, my wife, and I are incredibly proud to sponsor it through the players. And whenever we get cash from the royalties, we present that to them. And it's a wonderfully energizing feeling that when they become successful, when people buy the books, that helps those players to be successful because the women have got full-time jobs. They're in the fourth level at the moment, hopefully third next season of women's football. And it's a wonderful privilege to be able to feel that we have some kind of influence on developing the club. So anyone who buys the book, all royalties go to Exeter City Women. And I hope that's something that people are really pleased with.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think everyone can get behind that. Saw earlier on Twitter as well that Exeter City women are have broken quite a few records this season and are continuing to break records, which is absolutely fantastic.
Undefeated for 365 days, Rory, have to say. I've got that on my notes for Saturday.
Wow, wow, absolutely phenomenal.
That is good, isn't
Um,
it?
yeah, and of course you'll be at the stadium on Saturday. If anyone,
Yep.
well, this podcast won't be out by then. Unfortunately, I don't know why I was about to say that. Must remember to take that out. But
Yeah, yeah.
for when this podcast does go out, anyone can
Mm,
pop down and see Matt at the Exeter City Stadium in his new role as stadium announcer. Of
mm.
course, if you want to go and buy his books or check out the work that he does on Twitter, you can find him on Caboodle68. Is that right?
That's right, yeah, as in Kitten Caboodle, and I was born in 1968, so it seemed like a good idea at the time.
There you go. I don't know, Mass. I'm not even going to try and say anything about that. So yeah, you can go and check him out there and go and buy all of his books. Read them, help him out with different things. If he ever has something to ask you, if you have a project that you want
Mm.
Matt to be aware of, then I'm sure he'd be more than happy for you to get in touch, so that you can talk
Absolutely,
about that.
because the hardest thing about being a writer is not the writing, it's the publishing. And I've got a really good publishing company, Pitch Publishing. So if there are people out there with really good ideas connected to football, I'll be more than happy to help them, put them in touch with Pitch because they're a really, really supportive group of people.
Once again, thank you to all of our listeners who tuned in for this episode. If there's a topic that you want us to cover related to football history or heritage, whether that be lost clubs, clubs with specific identities, fan groups with specific cultures around them, community clubs that are creating new heritages and new identities, and please do get in touch. We're happy to cover anything really under the banner of football history and heritage. So reach out and have a chat with us, and we'll see what we can do to make it happen. You can reach us on X, that's @_footyheritage, or you can email us at hello@footballheritage.co.uk. Please also check out our website, which is footballheritage.co.uk, where all of our written content goes. Our contributors are throwing up some really great stuff at the moment, so please go and check that out and support them if you're able to. But for now, Matt, say goodbye.
Thank you so much. Great to talk to you, Rory.
Great chatting to you as well, mate. It's a goodbye from me as well. We'll see you all again next week. Goodbye.